Welcome to Message from the Mountain. This is part 3 of PassoverSeder communion study. This part is going to be on the Matzah, the unleavened bread. And there's a few things that, that's really interesting of how the Jewish people do this in the Seder, even as Jesus done it. And the Jewish people still have no idea why they do these things, but they do them, and it represents Jesus Christ, the Messiah. They was to study this. This was supposed to be a holy convocation, which also means a holy assembly or a rehearsal. So they were rehearsing so that they would know all this, so when the Messiah would come, they would know him. But just like today, we get into such rituals that we lose sight of who Jesus Christ is. But anyhow, I want to get into this. We're going to talk about the matzah. It's very interesting about the matzah. They put 3 pieces of this in a matzah bag, and it has pockets in it. It has 3 pockets. So you put 3 pieces in there. Now it's interesting that in the PassoverSeder that some says it's Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and then there's some the older ones, more orthodox, says it's God, the high priest, and the people. Well, to us it's the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, because it's interesting when they put this bread into the matzah bag, the 3 pockets. Notice the middle one. Okay, let's notice the middle one. Okay, we see Isaac, which Isaac was the firstborn of the promise, the high priest. We know that Jesus Christ is our high priest, and he's also the Son. Now this is the piece of bread that they take out of the bag, is the middle piece. So it's taking out the Son or the high priest, and this is the one they take out. And as we look at this piece of matzah, I want you to notice that it has holes throughout. They do that so that the matzah will bake quicker, because when you take the flour, even not having any yeast in it, no leaven, you still have to get it ready and in the oven in 18 minutes or less, because if you don't, it still will rise to some extent. So they have to do it. It has to bake very quickly, and they punch the holes in it so that it will bake so much quicker. And if you look, there's brown spots on the bread, and it's not fit for Passover unless it has those brown spots. And if you'll notice, it has these grooves, which are what's called stripes in it. Now, if we look at this piece of bread, Isaiah tells us that he would be bruised for our iniquity, that he would be pierced through, and by his stripes we would be healed. So this is what Jesus was talking about, this being his body, because he was getting ready to be pierced through, to receive the stripes and the bruising. So as you pull this middle piece of bread out of the matzah bag, they take it and you break it. Okay? Now what you do, you take one piece, you take the smaller piece, and you put it back in the bag. Now they've been doing this for like 30-some hundred years. So they put that back in there. So that means that God and the high priest and the people, or Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, or Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, that Trinity is still intact. Even though the Son was broken, he was still intact in the Trinity. So that you put that piece back in the bag. Now it's interesting that you take this piece, and this piece becomes the Alpha Coma. That word was added later on, but anyhow, this piece you take and you wrap it in a piece of white linen. Does this remind you of anything? It's pierced through, it's bruised, and striped. It's been striped. And you take it and it's been broken. You wrap it in the white linen, and you take it and you hide it. You put it under something. You put it out of sight. Just as Jesus was broken and wrapped in linen and put in the tomb out of sight. That's the way this bread is done. Now, it goes through, you go through the biggest part of the Passover, and then when you come down to the part of, we talked a minute ago on the third cup, the cup of redemption, this is when the Alpha Coma is brought out of hiding. It became a custom for the children to go hunt for the Alpha Coma. And the reason is to keep the children excited so that they would pay attention and learn. But they would go and they would find the Alpha Coma, and it would be redeemed. It would be resurrected. It would be brought back out and unwrapped. Now get this. It would be unwrapped. And this is the piece of bread that Jesus Christ took. And he said, "This is my body." And he broke it. And they took communion with the piece of bread that was broken, buried, and resurrected. So when you're eating of this bread, you're not eating of just any bread. He said, when you eat of this bread, he was talking about the bread that's been resurrected, the Alpha Coma bread, that when you eat of this, do it in remembrance of my death until I come. That remember that he was broken, buried, and resurrected. And that is the gospel of Jesus Christ. That's everything about the gospel of Jesus Christ right here in this bread. And this is the bread that you take at communion. And that's the reason it's so important to learn this, is because to understand this bread, understand what it's all about, what it represents. This is the bread that was resurrected. The power and the operation of God that rose Jesus from the dead. And this is the bread you take. And notice remember also that it tells us in Isaiah that we are healed by his stripes. We're healed. Now, here's something very interesting. When you read, David writes about it in the 105th Psalm. He tells us that when they came out of Egypt, after eating this bread and having the Passover, that there was not a feeble one among them. Now that's pretty interesting. Out of approximately, my understanding, about 2.5 million people, that they all walked out on their own 2 feet. That's very, very interesting. Well, if I want to back up here just a minute. If you go to 1 Corinthians chapter 11, let's see what verse it's in. Okay, it's in verse 30. Or go 29 and 30. He says, "For if he that eateth and drinketh unworthy eateth and drinketh damnation to himself, not discerning the Lord's body," not understanding the Lord's body, not understanding the wine and the bread. He says, "For this cause," now listen, he says, "For this cause many are weak and sickly among you, and many sleep." That's pretty heavy. So, there's healing in Jesus Christ, and it really struck me when this is included in the commandment of taking communion. So that's the reason I think it's really important to understand the bread that we eat at communion. So you see, when we take communion in a regular communion service, I don't, does going through the process of hiding it and resurrecting this bread have anything to do with it? Is it something, or is it? But I think what most of it is it's symbolic that we as people, we take things visually. We really need to see things visually for it to really register in our minds. And I think the reason it's set up in the Passover like that, so that you actually see it broken. You see it, and it was a rehearsal to show the Jewish people what was going to happen to the Messiah, so that they would know who he was, and that when he was resurrected, they could eat of that bread and have the blessing and the healing in Jesus Christ. But it's also to be a reminder to us each and every year, and when we take communion, when we take a bite of that bread, we realize it is the power of God that he rose Jesus from the dead. Very, very interesting. I mean, it's even so much, you get so much more out of it when we're actually sitting down and the wine is sitting before you, and the bread is broke and the blessing is set over the bread, and we pass it out and take communion together. It's just an awesome, awesome, awesome time. So I know that some of these episodes are going to be kind of short, but I kind of want them not to worry. You can watch them and enjoy them and go on about your day and hope it'll be a blessing to you and that you learn something. But, remember, that's the bread that was broken. The Son of God, Jesus Christ. And I hope you enjoyed this, and I don't know exactly what the next episode's going to be about. I'm just letting the Lord lead me on this, and we'll find out in the next part. Thank you very much for watching.
Don't believe that I would find my pathway to the sky. Don't believe